Hello, my name is Andrew, and I want to share this story with you about a missionary being evacuated with his family. Not because it's particularly fun for me to relive this, but I hope it might be helpful if even one other missionary finds this beneficial or someone in their support network, so that you can know kind of what to expect if you have to be evacuated at some point in your missionary service. So one day, my family was sitting around the campfire and we were enjoying some conversation when the night guard came by and informed us that the ferry service to the island we were living on was going to shut down. This was because of a disease called COVID-19 that was kind of hitting the world by storm in March of 2020. Now, we had already experienced some strange illnesses in our island leading up to this point.
By 3 p.m. today, she had a headache and then she died.
There was people who were sick for weeks, and I myself was sick for 14 days with some shortness of breath and fever in February of 2020. And so we weren't really sure what that was all about, but we had heard about this thing called COVID-19. And so that was at 7 p.m. on one night, and we were in conversation with our mission organization when they said, "You better get out of there." So, with just a few hours before nightfall, and we started to pack furiously. And so, let's roll this first clip, and you can see what that was like here.
Want to evacuate with how soon they just got back. What's that?
We're about to evacuate and go to Musoma. The coronavirus is coming, and on the island, we just found out today that they will be stopping all the ferries. So this is our last chance tomorrow, hopefully, to get off the island, and we're gonna give it our best shot. So.
Okay, well, I think you can tell by the sweat on my face there. I was a little bit intimidated by the thought of getting my family and all of our possessions off of this island. We had two small girls, and somehow we were supposed to know what to pack, what was essential, and what we should leave behind for an unknown amount of time. So at this point, we thought we were maybe going just to a nearby city to take shelter. We had no idea that soon we would be leaving the country. So the first stage was a little bit of shock. We had a lot of things to pack. We had choices to make, kind of what was needed for that time, and I think I was feeling a lot of that sort of panic stress. So just brace yourself for that. If you experience that, I think that's pretty normal. So this was, I think we ended up getting to sleep about midnight after about maybe 4 hours of packing. And then we had to be up before 4 a.m. to make sure that we didn't miss that first ferry. So we actually showed up at the ferry port at 4:30 a.m. and there was already a line of cars wanting to get on that ferry and get off the island. They had said that this would be the last day they were running ferries, and so there was just so many cars. Fortunately, our car was one of the last to be admitted onto the ferry, even though the ferry didn't leave till 8 o'clock. We got there hours early, before it was even light outside, and thank God we were able to get a spot on the ferry. So once we made it back to mainland Tanzania, got off the island, we then had another information that came to us from the U.S. State Department that said, if you're overseas, you better evacuate now or be prepared to spend an unknown amount of time overseas. So in this next clip, we're going to take a look at what that was like, and just kind of the disorienting. You'll see a lot of just confusion as we're trying to pack up our things. Fortunately, my parents were there at this time and were able to help us. So let's roll that next clip.
Here's a continuation of the evacuation story. We now found out that we are going to be leaving Tanzania. We got a flight with Kevin and Pam, so that's really good. But in the meanwhile, we're trying to now reorganize our things to only the bare essentials for what we'll need for life in the United States. And we're gonna say goodbye to the beautiful Tanzania until we see you again. As we've been told now by the State Department that it's important that we get out of the country, and that any volunteers and such should return to the USA at this time.
All right. So what you can see in that video, there's some hope, there's some optimism, probably a little too much for that point. But when you hear the words, "You're going home," you immediately start to think about home. You start to imagine yourself there. You start to think about all the things you've gone without for the many months or years that you've served on the field. And so you can see I'm a little excited here, but underneath that excitement, there is a nervous energy. And underneath that nervous energy, there are many unknowns that I don't know. Where are we going to live? Where are we going to, work? How are our needs going to be met? What are we going to do with all the things we didn't bring or didn't get to bring? How are we going to get those? And so there are many things that even at this point I hadn't really thought through. Now, in this evacuation story, God was really working in some pretty amazing ways on our behalf. We got to the airport and we started to get ready to leave. And as we were leaving, we had an issue with our baggage routing. The bags were going to be dropped off at the baggage claim of the next airport, which was meant to be Uganda. And we would have to leave the airport to the baggage claim to get the bags, to recheck the bags for our international flight. Well, if you leave the airport, at this point they had already instituted a 14-day mandatory quarantine in Uganda. So we were going to be stuck and our bags weren't going to be routed. It took down to the last minute in Tanzania to discuss this with airline representatives, but we finally got the bags routed through to our final destination in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is while we were in transit to Uganda, we were going to stop in Nairobi, Kenya. It was kind of a bootleg flight where you stop at Kenya and you keep going to Uganda from there. We landed in Kenya. As soon as we got off the plane, they told us that next flight to Uganda won't be happening. And until further notice, we were stuck in Nairobi, Kenya. So we kind of breathed a sigh of kind of relief that we weren't going to somehow fall into a quarantine situation, but also we started to become nervous again because we didn't know how we were going to make that next flight. Not only that, but our tickets that we had already paid for, very expensive tickets by the way, were flying out of Uganda to the USA, not Nairobi, Kenya. So how could we make this work? Well, we called our mission agency in the middle of the night and said, "We need your help. We've maxed out the credit cards. We don't have any money to book any other flights." But immediately we had started searching for flights home from Nairobi, Kenya. It was totally a miracle, but I think we were some of the first people to look for those flights. We booked them right away. We got flights through London and back from London to Minneapolis. But it was almost a miracle because we booked those flights a half hour later. The price of those tickets was $500 more. A half hour from there, the tickets were $500 even more expensive. And so it was just amazing to see how God had put us in the right place at the right time with the right resources so that we could get home. Now, once we were back to the USA, I want to just say that things didn't always go as we had planned. And I want to segue here just to let you see a little clip of the video I had shot right when I got back home and show you kind of what I looked like at that point. Here we go.
Hey, so we're back in the USA now, and after a somewhat turbulent evacuation from Tanzania, I'll just give you the basic story. We left from that last video, Mwanza, and made it to Nairobi, Kenya. And once we were in the airport in Kenya, we found out that we could not actually go into Uganda, which is where our flight was scheduled to go out from. Could not go to Uganda without being 14 days in quarantine. So at that point, we decided not to continue on to Uganda, and we looked instead for a different flight from Nairobi. We found something that routed through London, and we ended up taking that flight from London to Dallas to Minneapolis. So we made it home. We had some interesting moments there in the airport where the ticket prices were just going way, way up. for those tickets, and then like we bought the tickets, and 30 minutes later they were like $1,000 more per ticket. So we had a couple little interesting moments there, but once we made it through, made it home, we settled into about maybe a week or even 2 weeks of just kind of downtime, resting, trying to recover, and that was really great. We started communicating with the team and the people in Tanzania during that time, and we've kept those continuing to until today. So that's kind of where things went. Now we're in the process of getting some counseling sessions going just to kind of debrief everything. And other than that, we're just kind of life as usual here in Minnesota, trying to navigate what's the new normal here in terms of our communications as missionaries. We've been doing research. I was able to complete a history on the martyrs of Ukrewe. We also completed a newsletter, so we haven't been wasting any time. We've been busy since we got back, but that's kind of a little bit of an update on how things went. And yeah, thanks for your prayers too, I guess. All right.
Okay. Well, as you can see in that video, they're still kind of got that optimism of we're just going to snap back into life as usual here in Minnesota. And although there were some parts of that that were true, by and large, not the case. When you evacuate, you are going to leave your heart in the place you left, probably, and you might also just find it really difficult to start operating as a productive unit. I think I mentioned there it took about 1 to 2 weeks of even just downtime just to start to feel normal again. We had jet lag to get over. We had a lot of emotional letdown after we got back. And so there was a lot of things that I'm really glad we got counseling for that. I really highly recommend that. We ended up doing about 6 sessions of counseling just to debrief our first year, but also talk about some of the different traumas that we had experienced, even as part of the evacuation. So give that some thought. I want to show you a couple pictures here. There's a lot of foods that you have missed probably when you were away, and so you start, at least for me, we started kind of going back into our normal USA foods, and it was it was pretty intense there for a little bit. But although the surroundings may feel familiar, that might be a surface level type of thing. Your body and your mind and your soul kind of have this way of hiding things from you, including pain. I had a lot of pain of leaving my dog in Tanzania that I didn't even discover until weeks later. There's also just various things that I think you probably won't discover if you have to evacuate. You probably won't discover some things until much later. It's not going to all hit you at once. You might kind of have these waves. One thing we noticed, I mentioned the emotional letdown. One thing we noticed is that our life was considerably less stressful in the USA. So we actually had an emotional upswing from that. But there was the grief of missing friends, the uncertainty of not knowing when we could go back. Some of those things were still very difficult. So if you're ever in this situation or know somebody who is, I just encourage you to give yourself a lot of time to readjust, and don't try to jump into some kind of productive person right away. I think in my little video there I said I'm not wasting any time. I wish I would have maybe wasted a little more time just to get back to life here. All right, so that's everything up until the point where we had kind of re-entered. I want to just give you a little bit of a bird's eye view. We're now 7 months past March when we evacuated, and I want to tell you how things have gone since then. We have taken kind of a temp job at a place. We've had some struggles with housing. We've had many different challenges to overcome, kind of just readjusting our personal finances to living in the USA. And so expect challenges if you have to evacuate. One of the first ones I recommend you address as soon as you're feeling up to it is your housing situation. You may settle into a very temporary housing situation, possibly with family or friends. I encourage you to think long term. If possible, at all possible, try to get your own space. We ended up staying 6 months at my parents' house because we weren't sure when we were going to go back. Well, we ended up getting delayed almost a year. And so I just encourage you to think long term. And when you make that decision about housing, try to consider how beneficial it might be to have your own place. About other things, job types of things. In this year, we ended up kind of picking up a temporary job as an interim pastor at some rural church in Wisconsin, and that was kind of a nice stabilizing force. We had less to do with the missionary work, and so we had this opportunity to give a little more of ourselves to ministry opportunity. That was a nice stabilizing force. One other thing about I'm going to say about finances and just you taking care of you is make sure that you do adjust your spending back to your U.S. based spending if you have the option of getting on a little bit higher cost of living reimbursement from your organization. Great, but take care of yourself, and I mean that seriously. Reinvest in some of your hobbies that you left when you left that country. Get back into those. Try to do that soon. I feel like that's been something that's really grounded me as I came back. I had computers to build, so I built a couple computers, and that was something I really enjoyed a long time ago. Got back into a couple games that I enjoyed with my wife on the computer. Had a great time with that. And I poured in some resources into these hobbies that were really a part of my self-care. Really do takes the time to please do spend the resources. I know it's a lot of money compared to where you just left. Probably if you were serving on the mission field, you'd never think about spending this much money on yourself. Just please consider doing that. That was definitely something that helped us. Also, make your needs known to as many people as possible. I'm gonna try to paint this picture for you. This is how I've talked to I talk to people about evacuation. It's like if you've ever had to start over with a new laptop computer and you've wiped all your files off and you're trying to reinstall an operating system on that computer, trying to get all your files downloaded from the right places. It's exhausting. And your life after evacuation is like that blank computer. You probably don't have a lot of things at your disposal. You're missing your favorite cooking utensils. You're missing that shirt that you really feel comfortable in. You're missing, in our case, our car seats for our girls. We didn't have. And so we made some of these needs known right away. Also, we live in a cold climate. It was in the middle of winter. We asked people for winter clothes, and they came through. Just be public about your needs and public about the things that you left behind as you're trying to get, let's use that imagery of your computer. As you're trying to get your computer reinstalled with all the right programs, let other people help you in that process. Give them a chance to bless you and your family with some of those things you need. We ended up borrowing a couple car seats from family. We ended up getting some winter clothing from extended family, and there was a church that donated $200 just so we could get out and buy some new clothes. So when you make your needs known, people are going to want to step up and help you. So that's something about financing and finances and all that. But I just want you to know as well that there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's going to be times when you're just flying high and you're just so happy you're in your home culture again, and there's going to be other times where you just really miss the place you left. And that's very normal for this, I think. As we were talking to our counselor about that, they said take time to grieve the losses that you have. And I want to say that to you too. Just grieve the losses that you have, whether it was the consistent life you left behind or the friendships, whatever it was that was special to you about the place you left. Grieve those losses. All right. Well, I kind of want to wrap up this video. I've kind of talked for quite a bit already. But last little thing is just cover yourself in prayer. It's really easy to get spiritually dried up in the middle of an emotionally exhausting time. And so in the middle of this time, I just encourage you to keep praying, keep seeking the Lord through His Word, and find how He refreshes you in your soul as you go through this evacuation process. So there's my little reflection on our evacuation, a couple little clips I hope you found interesting. I really hope this goes well for you. I know it's not something I'd wish on anybody, but the Lord will be with you through this. Take care.